Is the new killer Vecna stronger than the nurse? I know it's weird to see a video like this coming from the guy who made a video "The new killer Vecna sucks." I made that video because I needed some money to afford a monster dildo fantasy horse dildo with two big knots, huge dildo, thick anal dildo with big strong suction cup, dragon dildo, dog knot dildo for women sex, anal toys for men gay, adult toys for women. You get the idea. Negativity brings views, views bring money, and money brings a monster dildo fantasy. But after testing this killer for many hours, I realized that this killer is much more fun than I initially expected him to be. And not only is this killer fun to play in my opinion, but this killer has potential, actually some very serious potential, to join the strongest killer in this game roster. So let me tell you why I'm comparing Vecna to the nurse, because some of you might think that I'm out of my mind. But before that, smack that subscribe button if you want me to stick my big penis up your dad's butthole. Okay, so Vecna is the first killer in the game with so many abilities put into one single killer. He has 4 different spells that he can cast, which makes this killer's power extremely complicated for beginners. Like, for example, when I started playing Vecna, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. On the other hand, the nurse has been probably the most beginner unfriendly killer in Dead by Daylight for a very long time now. But I think that for beginners it's much easier to get a grasp on how the nurse works faster than Vecna, because Vecna's power is much more complicated due to 4 different spells being in one single power. However, when it comes to mastering the killer, I have no doubt that the nurse will stay above Vecna as the hardest killer to master in Dead by Daylight, or one of the hardest killers to master in the game, because there are killers like the Huntress, for example, which takes thousands of hours to truly play like a professional. If I asked you who is the strongest killer in Dead by Daylight, most of you would say it's the nurse. And the reason why the nurse is above any killer in Dead by Daylight, and by the way it has always been this way, is because the nurse is the only killer who breaks the game's rules by being able to blink through walls, pallets, windows, and basically any object in the game. The nurse is a very punishing killer to play because she has extremely long cooldown times, she can only blink a couple times and then there's a cooldown, she is the slowest killer in the game, but all of these downsides don't even matter when you give her power being able to blink through any object to an experienced player. That's when the nurse becomes an S tier killer. Now you know the reason why the nurse is considered to be the strongest killer in the game. And I can already answer the question if Vecna is stronger than the nurse. The answer is a no, but let me tell you why Vecna has potential to take the strongest killer's spot in the game. So first of all, I want to make it clear that Vecna is a 4.6 meters a second speed killer. It means that speed is not punishing this killer, not to mention that one of Vecna's spells allows this killer to fly extremely fast for a short duration of time to reach far distances much faster, which makes it very easy to apply a bunch of pressure on survivors no matter how far away they are. One of the killers who suffers from not being able to apply a bunch of map pressure due to his slow speed is Checky. I remember when Checky came out, everybody was saying that he is a potential S tier killer. It means that Checky could be one of the strongest killers in the game, but the fact that he's a slower killer and he doesn't have that map pressure power, not to mention that developers decided to nerf him for some reason, stupid developers, it broke his potential to be one of the strongest killers in Dead by Daylight. Vecna doesn't suffer from the same issue, and Vecna's map control ability becomes even better when you learn that one of Vecna's spells allows Vecna to send this huge bubble. This bubble is invisible to survivors, by the way, except if they have this magical item which can reveal this bubble, but most of the time, at least in the beginning of the match, they won't have this, And if the survivor is in the range of this bubble, then you will know that the survivor is in there. So most of the time, you will know where to go. You will not have to think, is the survivor in front of me or behind me? Just cast your spell and you will know. So map control and extra mobility is already incorporated into Vecna's power. But if that was enough to make the killer an S tier killer, then the Legion would be an S tier killer. To find out if Vecna is really a strong killer, we have to ask a question: is this killer good at chases? Does this killer have an ability to deny loops or pallets? And the answer is yes. This killer is able to block the pallet for a couple seconds so survivors cannot drop it. This killer can break the pallet in 3 seconds without needing to touch it with the add-on. This killer is able to fly directly through the pallets or windows without needing to vault them, and one of this killer's abilities allows this killer to place a bunch of projectiles and hit a survivor within a certain range without needing to M1 that survivor. So imagine if a survivor drops a pallet in front of you and you're thinking, shit, should I just go around the pallet or should I lift up that pallet? You can just place your projectiles and hit that survivor. It's also a ranged killer. And yes, one thing that I didn't mention before is that this killer has a spell which allows Vecna to lift a dropped pallet. So imagine you see a pallet that is dropped, bam, you use a spell in a second and it's standing again. So in summary, this killer is very good at map control, loop denial. This killer is good at learning where the survivors actually are. This killer is a ranged / melee kind of a killer. So when we take all of this information, theoretically, this killer is incredibly overpowered, right? Well, Vecna could be overpowered, but he isn't. You see, this killer suffers from a bunch of issues, such as glitchiness of the PTB. This PTB is kind of buggy. And another thing is his cooldowns feel very long, way too long. They make this killer very sluggish. And even though this killer has a perfect potential to be an S tier killer, close if not even better than the nurse, because he has all of these benefits in his abilities, but the cooldowns make this killer feel so sluggish that despite having more spells than any killer has powers in this game, this killer can sometimes feel like he's an M1 killer. For example, why does casting a sphere to reveal where the survivors are make you slower? Why does an info ability have to slow you down if you will not even use this ability while being in a chase? Why would you want to get slowed down while searching for survivors? It feels terrible. Another problem is that this killer is able to fly, and flying feels great. This killer doesn't need to get his flying duration increased or decreased, it's alright, but after flying, there's an unnecessary 4 or 5 seconds delay, and you need to wait for 4 seconds after stopping to fly to be able to hit a survivor. It feels terrible. Sometimes you fly to a survivor, you reach that survivor, you stop your flying state, and that survivor is capable of reaching another pallet while you are recovering from your cooldown. This is absolutely unnecessary, and it would make this killer very overpowered if the cooldown wasn't there. But as I mentioned in my previous video, I think developers should reduce this cooldown to 1 second. 1 or 2 seconds is enough of time to recover without making this killer overpowered. Preventing a survivor from dropping a pallet feels great, but you can only hold a pallet for 4 seconds. Yes, you can increase the time by a couple seconds by using the add-on, but I think that developers should increase the base time of this spell by at least 3 extra seconds, because it takes survivors like 10 seconds to come around a big loop, and that's when your spell becomes useless. Yes, you have prevented a survivor from dropping a pallet once, congratulations, but by the time survivor comes around that loop, he is already able to drop a pallet on you, and your spell, which should deny dropping the pallet, is already on a cooldown. And cooldowns, by the way, they are long. This killer has long cooldowns. I think they should be decreased by at least a half half, and I know it sounds crazy, but because cooldowns are so long, most of the time it feels like this killer is an M1 killer, especially after like using all of your abilities, casting all of your spells. There are some of these moments when you feel like, fuck, when will they recover? I want to use my spell again, you know? I think that the ranged projectile spell is the least problematic, but survivors are able to avoid your projectiles by crouching. Also, these projectiles are very RNG based because there are empty spaces in between your projectiles, so sometimes you can aim directly at a survivor, but if the empty space hits a survivor, then nothing happens. So it's an RNG kind of a power. But overall, Vecna is a very strong killer. There's a potential for this killer to be an S tier killer, which I think that we need more S tier killers in the game. This killer could be standing close to Blight or Spirit. If developers decide to change some of the numbers, it's literally just numbers that have to be changed to make this killer much more powerful than he actually is right now. So let's see how it goes and comment your opinion. Overall, I found this killer very fun. I will see you later. Bye.